Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is an exclusive story from a brand new author by the name of KB Michaels, aka Azra Ali. And as ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. And title: The Black Dragon's Night. Chapter 3, Army of Ants. Let's get straight into that. The small unit had left the city of Rizak with marching orders to deal with the beast problem in the small town of Wolfgar in the southern woods. The town Wolfgar had been a rest spot for the traders that delivered goods from the southern border to the northern towns. Adventurers had made their way to the town to deal with the problem, but none had returned. The beasts were too clever, striking down most who entered its domain, never leaving survivors when it struck. Only the bloody mess left behind in its wake. Lord Rezok, a fat, stolid noble who was full of himself, had decided that a simple beast was easy to deal with. This was a chance to grab glory, since he had none during the war. It was beneath him, he thought, and he was stationed closer to the newly crowned king, protecting him, of course. This was a way to pay for that honor, he thought, that he himself would lead the charge. 20 men was all he brought, since this was just a mere beast. Among those he brought was a seasoned veteran named Oaken, a sergeant-in-arms who had served on the front lines during the war. One of the few survivors from the Veldum massacre, and a seasoned warrior. The old man wielded a double-headed broadaxe, and was still massive despite his age. Some swore that the blood of the giant was in the veins as he stood 7 foot, towering over most of the men. His muscles seemed to have been sculpted from stone, and he was not the easiest to handle. The bald man argued, forgetting he was low-born and had no right to speak out of turn. However, having the brute along might just put him in his place. Show him who really was in charge. However, to shut up Oaken, he did hire a scout and a hunter, like he had suggested. For that he let Oaken handle it, as he seemed to know what he was doing. Now Oaken had gone to the Hunters Guild, but was not part of the adventurers, as they normally let people out to the military. Proper order and the ability to follow commands when given, but Oaken already knew there was someone he had heard of. And that is why the half-orc Shirea was with them now. She wore deer-hide clothing. The shirt was sleeveless, falling short at her navel, while she wore breeches held up by a thick belt, and there was a long cloth that ran down the centre of the pants. Her boots came up to her knees, concealing the dagger hidden on it. Her quiver was full, hanging off from her left hip, while the other side had a sharp-hand axe hanging off from it. A tightly woven cord was strapped around her right arm, and she had a dark green bandana across her forehead. She didn't wear much jewellery, except for 2 feather earrings she had earned from ranking up within the Hunters Guild, and the tusk of the first creature she had hunted down, her so-called father. Now, her green skin wasn't the only thing she inherited from him. She had small tusks that slightly came out from the corners of her lower mouth, and was naturally strong. However, she was lucky she had her mum's green eyes, and she was also known as the Hound, and Oaken had requested her specifically. She was surprised, and so was the guild leader, stating, "You know that she has a reputation for dealing with the nobles. I heard the last one she punched in the face." "Aye, right. Isn't it interesting that a girl like that stubborn exists? She would have been loved by the young lord if he was still around. No, she's the May Westerner. Feels she would have been most valuable on this so-called hunt. The chuffing beast is clever and has done enough damage to warrant that we should take the May West we can." And Oaken smirked, rubbing a long braided moustache and rubbed the top of his bald head that was tattooed with his tribe symbols. With that, she had been hired on with the caravan that had headed out, and she rode alongside of Oaken for the most part since. She saw that the way the Lord looked at her. She knew the whispers, being called Tuskface or worse. The men mostly avoided her, like most locals who didn't care for interspecies relationships. But Oaken, well, he seemed different. You seem different from your lord over there, Sergeant. Just call me Oaken, love. This ain't a man I wish to serve, but I go where I'm ordered to. I served another man during the war. He was more like a brother, right? Didn't care where you came from, as long as you fought and wanted to defend the blokes," Oaken said, adjusting his axe on his back. She scanned the forest line, but was a little surprised by what Oaken had said. "Oh, a noble says jumping. You actually obeyed him? Well, I find that hard to believe. I heard you fought in the war, and the rumours say you were one of the only survivors of the Valden massacre. Is there any truth in that?" Oaken chuckled and looked into those green eyes, saying, "Of course, right. I suspect you did your research before taking the Uncle Bob. And Lord Varney's just some noble who issued commands. Nah, right. He were there alongside us fighting, taking the bleeding lead in the fight. Ain't no bloke like him, right? Didn't care for his status, just what we were fighting for. The blooming blokes. This so-called lord, he's just in it for the bleeding glory, thinking it's going to be easy. Isn't it interesting that he don't seem to have noticed it, how quiet the forest has gotten as we travelled deeper and closer to Wolfgar? The more this feeling of dread comes over us. I can tell you know, see it all over your nanny goat race girl." He wasn't wrong, and she knew what he had been talking about. The forest felt wrong. Hell, a lot of places didn't feel right anymore. And she looked towards the men trudging forward with nervous looks covering their faces. She sighed and said, "I'm not sure why this is happening. It isn't as if the animals aren't here. You can see the signs of them, but they're avoiding us," Selena said. "Well, it's been like that for a while now. I tried to tell the Lord about it the last time we camped, but he wouldn't hear any of it." "Nah, kid him, right? He doesn't understand the gravity of the situation. God blimey, Guff. Not to worry, though." And Oaken gave a wink. "We got you to watch our backs." "We should leave this place, come back with an army of rangers and seasoned soldiers," Selena said, looking at the forest. The sun would be going down soon, and she knew the light of the moon would provide some lighting to the forest, but she'd rather not be here. And the forest seemed darker, as if the shadows threatened to leap up and grab you. A chill lingered on the air, and it felt as if something was caught within her throat. Maybe even her heart. Death was here. It covered the entire area like a blanket. It threatened to creep into the very soul, as the men could feel it also. You could see it so often as they looked from the roads to the woods. Instinct was something one could not beat, ignored, but that was the wrong choice. Oaken didn't seem bothered one bit, though, as far as she could tell. "Oh, I'm just a bit better at hiding the blooming nerves than the others, love, right? I can tell it ain't right here. Smells like a trap. Like we're being allowed into the woods, just so we can be slaughtered. There ain't nothing there, like the shadows themselves are going to reach out and grab you." It was then that the Lord Rezok rose his hand up and shot up, and he shouted as it echoed through the tree line. "We make camp. Set off from the side of the road. Set up my tent and get a fire started. You, Hookface and Barbarian, why don't you two make yourselves useful? Go hunt up some deer or something for us." "Look yourself, you serving pig," Selena began to say, but Oaken cut her off. What's she's meaning to say, my lord? We ain't seen anything for a long time. It's too late to go in and hunt now. May wish to break out rations. I know it ain't your calibre, lord, but I'm sure there's some tasty dried aged beef we can warm up for you." Razak snuffed and spat to the side. "Peasants? Fine. Then help the men set up camp. I don't know why I bothered to bring the two of you." "Ugh. Why did you bring me along then, my lord? I'll be content with just sitting on my backside back in the city. You got this fine strapping young lot with you. If you like, my grace, we can always excuse ourselves back to the city. I mean, we are, after all, useless, right?" Anger crossed over his lips in an almost like sneer. "You know your place. You gather my provisions now, and I expect dinner within the hour." Selena cursed under her breath as Oaken looked up to the fading sun. There was a red in the clouds, as if it had been smeared with blood. Ugh, gonna be a hell of a night. The air seemed unnaturally colder for the season, and even though it wasn't right for the season, the silence was almost unbearable, as Selena had recommended several fires this night. Rezek was against it, but she put several fire bundles near where she was encamped with Oaken. She had gotten to know the man and couldn't help but not consider him an old man. He was younger than the Lord Rezek, but more seasoned than the other soldiers. Oaken chose to encamp with her instead of spending time with the men. She never asked why, but tonight she had to know why. Do you think I'm going to fall for your muscles and sleep with you? You're wrong. You might as well go back to your boys and come up with some kind of lie to tell them. My boys? Oaken erupted out laughing and wiped a tear from his eyes. Oh, that's rich. I don't know any of the men, and to boot, not right welcome round them. Me old lord won't thought of fondly, and many noble-blooded soldiers can't even look at some bloke like me. Nah, you're more fun to be with, and probably a lot more handy with that bow than they are with them pikes. Hellfire, this lot hasn't even seen a battle, let alone gone on a hunt. Have a look at 'em, right? They're not watching the bleeding woods either, huddled around the fire, chasing the bleeding cold away. Nah, the night's fallen. You'd think that some bloke would understand that we've been out in hostile territory this whole time. By the goddess, I could use a nice frosty mead to settle me right now. As Selena understood what he was talking about, the Lord was taking this whole situation so lightly, without a care in the world. However, she had heard that many adventurers had gone missing in Wolfgar. The hulking warrior was watching her back while relying on her to watch his, and she realized Oaken was scanning the tree lines even now, and that his axe was actually unstrapped and ready by his side. He extended his hand, warming it near the fire, and said, You'd expect the night sounds by now. And the flames flickered in her eyes as she coughed a bit. Sorry, I just thought the whole soldier thing. Anyways, you talk about this lord all the time. What happened to him? Dunno, to be honest. Oaken had a distant look in his face as he looked deep into the fire and let out a sigh. We were headed to the border town of Veldan. And Selena's eyes widened as she heard the rumours of him being a survivor. No one really knew the details of that day, though. Most of the survivors disappeared, retiring to some lone location. They had all refused to talk about it. I've heard rumours. So it's true, then? You're a survivor of the Veldan massacre? Aye, right. I was in the thick of it with the blooming commander. It's funny, right? I remember how much we hated being reminded we were a noble, and the blooming other nobles didn't care for it. That's why we'd been selected to go, while the bleeding rest of the blooming armies had been sent elsewhere to deal with another skirmish. The town folk, they would have been slaughtered. After all, what's one border town? Well, that's nothing but commoners. But the bloody commander, they wouldn't hear any of that nonsense. So why not send a commoner, love, right? Squire? Hell, this lot hasn't even seen a battle, right? Let alone gone on a hunt. Have a look at 'em. They're not watching the bleeding woods either, huddled around the fire, chasing the bloody cold away. Do what, governor? Oaken paused briefly as he looked up into the fading light of the sun, watching the stars slowly peeking out, blotted out overhead by the trees. He shook his head in disgust as he looked back into the fire, throwing another log on. You were all wrong, though. Our commander, he had a bad feeling from the get-go. Even the sun hid that day. Dark clouds gathered overhead. The air was still, almost holding its breath, right, waiting for something. The town, all the bloody fucking lot of them. We showed up what seemed too late. Not a single soul was there. Just blood and carnage. Bodies everywhere. It was true, horrifying, but we weren't alone. Nah, them things were still there, waiting for us. I watched as they tore the other soldiers to pieces, leaving nothing in their wake. And all of a sudden, blokes were dead, bodies everywhere, stacking up as men and ruddy ladies screamed. As soon as it started, it was ended pretty damn quickly, up and over within a few minutes. When having a look at the town, some geezer had the mockers put on them things. Pretty sure the commander did it himself, right? The mad bastard at the cost of his own life. After all was said and done, no one could find him. He can't have a knees up without a Joanna. Hellfire. He couldn't separate the dead afterwards. Body parts were everywhere. It was unlike anything I've ever seen before. And after that, though, the bleeding war, it had to come to an end. Oh, Oaken, I am sorry. No one would have blamed you for walking away from the service after that, let alone end up working for that pompous ass, Celine said, looking towards the elaborate purple and maroon large tent that was being set up. I could have, but the commander, he never would have forgiven me walking away. Not when the bloody blokes need protection. Still, sometimes, right, it's like you think I'm still alive out there, living life, recovering, but leaving all the corruption behind. Celine looked at the old man and smiled and said, Why do you think that? We found the commander's sword, in the middle of the blooming battlefield, stabbed through the bloody head of one of them things. His twin brother, right, mage on the bleeding council. I delivered the bleeding sword to him. He didn't seem upset by it, as if he knew something we all didn't. And before you ask, them things were large, full of scales, like a lizard man, but something more massive. Twisted horns on their loaf of bread, like a crown upon their head. Lizard men are common. Granted, I've never run into any tribe that had horns like that before. Aye, but they weren't lizard men, more dragon men of hellfire. 2 of them, standing like giants, clad in armour and skulls of their victims as jewellery and belts. It were as if they were leaking acid from their north and souths, right, and smelling of sulphur. Oaken had a horrified look in his eyes as he remembered. Celine couldn't even imagine such carnage. She was spared of ever being part of the war, but now she is even more glad she had had part of it. She saw how his knuckles were white from clenching his fist, until he took a deep breath in, relaxing his fist. She didn't know what to say to the old soldier as he let out a sigh, replacing it with a smile just as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The shadows slowly overtook the entire area. It was cold, as if an icy hand spread across them, forcing everyone to draw closer to the flames of the campfires. The horses, on the other hand, were being restless, trying to pull themselves free, and they could sense something as they were becoming frightened. And that was when screams echoed through the woods, filling the silence of the forest. The screams made everybody jolt as everybody peered into the darkness, trying to find the source as it seemed to come from all around them. And that was when the thunderous screams became a chorus of howls that rang like a crescendo in the woods and fell dead silent again. What the hell was that? Celine asked as she grabbed up her bow, notching an arrow. Oaken held his axe and slid his foot back, readying himself. The men looked afraid, gripping their weapons tightly. Everyone, close rank just in case, Oaken shouted. Belay that order. What do you think you are doing, Oaken? Are you jumping at shadows? You are soldiers of the Empire. Don't be scared of some wolves. Sir, that wasn't natural. It sounded like screams. One of the soldiers spoke up. Don't be stupid. The woods played tricks. Fine, set up a small patrol and bring me my supper. You idiots, he said as Rizak walked back into his tent. Damn fool, Oaken said. Do as he says. Be on guard, everyone. And the patrol consisted of 4 men who drew the short straw, grabbing up their gear. The sergeant-at-arms, Oaken, told them to actually do a circle around the encampment instead of spreading out. The leader of the group, Alexander, thought that this was stupid, and as soon as they were out of view, he stopped the 3. Well, this is dumb. We should split up and get this over with quickly. But Sergeant, Oaken said we should stick together. Ollie, a younger member, stated, feeling the uneasiness of the silent forest. Oh, shut it, you. Oaken is just some old man. You heard Lord Rezak. It's just some wolves. Dumb beasts, that's all. Jackin said, standing by Alexander. 2-man teams. We spread out to the end of the line and back before too long. I mean, if we run into some dogs, we can easily handle them, right? Jove chuckled, as he was a bit wider in the belly, saying, It'll be easy to deal with, kid. Everyone is just on edge because this is the first time we're going to see some action. Granted, it's just some beast. That's probably what was just making the noise. Hell, we kill this bastard, we're likely to get a raise in pay, Ollie just shook his head as he took his helmet off and ran his hands through his red curly locks. The others seemed so confident in what they were saying, but he looked back at the encampment. The Sarge hadn't steered them wrong yet, and he knew he was looking out for them, but there was something out there, something that just put him on edge. Alexander put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Joe will go with you. He is the strongest of us, right? He's got your back, and it would take us half the time to patrol. Come on, Ollie." And Jacker nodded his head to the side in approval. Ollie slipped his helmet on and let out a sigh of exasperation, and the boys knew they had persuaded him to go along with the plan. Jove slapped Ollie on the shoulder as he said, "That's my boy. Come on then. You can carry the torch, to keep you safe." And the three chuckled as Ollie couldn't help but smile with them. The four had decided to walk the lines going in opposite directions of each other, and decided to give a whistle to signal if they came across anything. Alexander and Jacken took the front of the line, just past the Lord's tent, while Ollie and Jove moved towards the back, close to the Sarge. They were about 20 feet out from the encampment, staying on the edge of the fire lines. It wasn't like the Sarge would be paying attention to them anyways. Alexander reasoned. He was too busy flirting with the tusk face. He didn't even know why she was even here. But they were all trained and could deal with this so-called beast. Alexander shook his head as he walked along and said, "Goddess, this was stupid. Why the hells do we have to be out here? I mean, this is stupid. We stay out by the fires and we huddle in waiting for the beast to move in. It's just a dumb animal. You know what I mean, Jacken?" Alex turned to the left to see what was going on and realized that Jacken had gone missing. He hadn't even heard the tall, lanky man take off. He didn't want to light a torch as it would alert Oaken that they had disobeyed his orders, as 2 torchlights would give that away. However, he knew Jacken was a practical joker, often pulling stunts for no reason other than to get a rise. "Oi, did you step off to take a piss or something, Jacken? You there, mate? Stop fooling around." And he heard something like a muffle of something, as if trying not to laugh or burst out screaming. Letting out a sigh, he went towards the tree. "Oi, knock it the hell off, man. It's getting cold and I'm getting hungry." Alexander went around the tree to the muffled noise and stepped into something wet and mushy. It smelled horrendous and had added a copper taste to the air. "Oh, come on, man. I think I just stepped in your shit. If you had to crap that bad, you should have..." "What the fuck?" The soldier uttered the words barely under his breath as his eyes went wide. Jacken, still barely alive, lay with his guts strewn out over the ground and blood spurting from his throat. It had been cut, as he could see the jagged bits of tattered flesh and armor sticking out, even in the dark. Fear gripped him as he scrambled back away from the fallen friend, slipping on what he knew to be innards of his friend. The scream wanted to come out, but it refused, caught in his throat as he scrambled back up and looked at his wet palms. They were covered in blood and mud. He tried to wipe them off desperately, off onto himself, as he scrambled back to his feet, and his senses coming back to him. Alexander turned to scream towards the line, to warn them, but as he did, his view was blocked. The beast stood well over him, almost as if he were a giant, its glowing red eyes staring down at him. The razor claw came upward swiftly, catching the lower part of the man's jaws. Muscles, teeth, and bones exploded as his tongue flapped in the wind, exposed. Horror filled the young man's eyes as he dropped to his knees, trying to say something, but only a gurgling noise escaped his mouth as his hand reached desperately for the short sword at his side. A blinding light exploded as more pain took over him, and he tumbled to the ground, reaching for where his arm had been. The wolf beast had torn it off, as if it were nothing, ripping muscle and flesh with ease. The creature held it above its muzzle, letting the torn arm's blood leak into its mouth, all the while staring down at him. As this happened, Ollie couldn't help but keep staring into the tree line, as Jove just hummed, picking at his nose. Crack! A twig snapped in the distance, and the young man's hand went for his blade. Jove himself reached for his own blade, staring around at the sudden action of the small man. "What? What is it? I heard something. A branch cracked out there," he said, drawing the blade straight off his hip. Jove shook his head and let out an exasperated sigh at Ollie while shaking his head. Ollie could feel it though. Something wasn't right. And as he started to slowly back towards the tree line, trying to escape the darkness while holding the torch high in his other hand. You worry over nothing, me old boy. It's just the wildlife. I mean, hell, torch will probably keep him back. Ollie shifted again, crouching as he could see something from the reflection of the light. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he said, "Would you shut up? Something's out there, Jove. We gotta get Sarge out here, man." Look, I'll walk out there and show you that there's nothing to be afraid of. Won't take me but a second. You always get this way. Want everyone to think you're a coward, man. Coward? That was a funny word, he thought, wanting to save one's own skin and not seek out trouble where he could. Yeah, since he had been little, he could sense danger was about him. His father may have been a noble, but they were still poor, and a man liked his drink. Wouldn't be such a problem if he hadn't taken it out on his mother and him. Ollie had gained a sixth sense about these things, and knew when to hide from the drinker. But he was small and his father was very large. As soon as he was able to, he had left to join the army, hoping to make something of himself, hoping that he could get strong enough to beat back men like his father. But the dream had slowly proved to be something of a lie. The soldiers, they were greedy, loudmouths and lazy to boot. None of them really trained hard or wanted to improve themselves, and it had all changed when Sergeant Oaken arrived, as he was something entirely different. Sure, the Lord hated him, and most looked down on him for not being a noble, but the man was made of different stock. Oaken had tried to train the men, with only a few actually listening to learn, and he had been told that there actually wasn't anything wrong with him, to listen to those instincts when it came down to it. Looking at Jove, he shook his head and said, "Oh, come on. Let's get the sergeant. Damn be the consequences." When you gonna listen to me? The old man doesn't know anything. What the hell is wrong with you? He watched as the young man's eyes widened in horror. Then he felt the sharp claws dig into his back. Ollie watched as the beast rose from the shadows as if it was part of the shadows. It looked to be a massive black wolf, but its body was that of a man, covered in long, thick, coarse hair. It stood on its haunches, but the front paws weren't paws at all. No, they were long, lanky arms that ended in massive clawed hands. Each was like a black dagger at the end of each finger. The snout was full of long, razor-sharp fangs that were pulled back, revealing the black gums in the torchlight. And Jove grunted out in painful horror as his hand reached towards the sword on his side. "Run, Ollie!" Before he could even draw the blade, he was lifted off the ground, and the rip of muscle could be heard. The claw sliced through, grabbing hold of the spine itself, before ripping it free from Jove's body, instantly killing him. Terror ripped through young Ollie as he saw the forest light up with several pairs of red eyes. The beast was not alone. The men set off into the woods, while others started to prepare meals. It was simple campfire stews, as they would throw bits of vegetables and dried meat in. Some old bread was used to sop up the juices and fill their bellies. However, Lord Rezak had a pheasant cooking over the fire, with fresh biscuits being made. The Lord didn't know what it meant to survive, and didn't care that his men ate like a dog. And for Oaken, he kept jerky ready and biscuits for such an occasion. He handed some jerky to Celine, and tore into one, scanning the forest line. The silence ate away at Celine as she gathered up her equipment, but Oaken put a hand on her shoulder, shaking his head. "I should be out there, with a patrol." "I'd rather you be by my side for now. Besides, I have a bad feeling about the blooming situation." He tightened his grip on his axe as his eyes scanned across the forest. And she let out a sigh and took a bite out from the jerky, and then let out another sigh. She kept her bow handy, ready to attack if necessary. However, the rest of the troops seemed so relaxed and they had almost forgotten about what had happened when the sun went down. They were already laughing and forgetting what they'd all heard just a short time ago. Some of the men seemed nervous, staying close to their weapons and following the patrol that was walking the perimeter. But the fact that most of them were so carefree, really pissed her off. She let out a sigh of frustration and scanned the tree lines again. Nobles, don't they know that something is wrong with this place? The closer we get to that town, it just pisses me off. Well, it's not their fault. Most of them are born with no claim to their house. Either this or join the clergy. It's how the nobles work. That's why they start off so low. Most high-ranking house members cop the rank of commander or an higher position. They said it was easy till I showed up. There's some of them took to it, but most of them don't even respect me. That doesn't bother you? Oaken nodded and chuckled. Of course it does. But ain't it the bleeding damnedest thing? I'd die protecting these lads. Don't get me wrong. Well, it's nothing to do with their titles or status. They are citizens, and that's what my commander cared about. These fellas are just stupid is all. Don't know their arse from their heads. Now, before she could say anything anymore, her head snapped to the other end as the wind blew on by, and there was a copper smell to it. It was blood. A lot of blood. Something has happened. Then the torch that was close to them was running towards them. More blood flowed on the air as she snapped towards the torchlight, rushing towards them. The horses, they started to buck and go wild, drawing the attention of everyone. They damn near ripped their own heads off, trying to break free. And Celine and Oaken looked back to the black forest, seeing who was approaching them. It was the smallest soldier, one of the 4 that had been with the patrol, and as he approached, unearthly howls rang out through the forest, followed by several more from different directions. The pitch was so loud it forced everyone to grab a hold of their ears in pain, including Celine. Oaken had already taken off as he grabbed a hold of the soldier. Ollie, what's got on in you? Why are you running like the devil's on your back, boy? Sarge, he is dead. Monsters. Wolves. They tore him apart. We split up. Oh, goddess. The others went that way. Jove, Sarge, Jove. He ripped out his fucking spine. And there were more. There's fucking more out there. And just as he said that, before Oaken could shout for the others to take arms, the large black wolf started out of the woods with incredible speed. One of the soldiers seemed to explode into a pool of blood, as another was grabbed and dragged off into the woods with ease. Screams erupted as the men tried to scramble as claws ripped into them. Celine was already notching several arrows, firing them directly right before them. The bowstring strummed to life as several arrows thudded into the chest of one of the wolves that had charged at them. It sent it falling back, but as it tumbled, it let out a low rumble that sounded almost like laughter, when it was already rising and ripping the arrows from its chest as if it were nothing. Screw you! Celine shouted as she launched another arrow, as it slammed true into its eye and out the back of its head. It let out a howl of pain, but Oaken moved forward, drawing his axe back, and as he did, the head lit up as writing appeared along the edge. The axe head bit deep as he brought it upwards with a mighty roar, slicing straight through the muzzle of the beast. Black ichor exploded over the ground, and there was a surprised look within those red eyes as they vanished. Ever since that day, I swore I would never be helpless. Come on, you fucks, come cop some. Oaken growled up, issuing a challenge to the beast. Celine noted the bodies of many of the soldiers, and blood spattered everywhere. The young soldier Ollie seemed stunned and gripped by fear as she notched the bow again, and several of the beast's move, rushing at them. As Oaken pulled a dagger out, tossing it to her, it had the same runes as the axe head, and he said, Protect the boy. We need to run, you idiot. Celine caught the dagger and instantly notched her bow, taking aim at those approaching. But something was different about these ones. She pulled out, and there was a click following as she notched them. She fired, and they struck one beast. A large blast of flame erupted, turning a big furball into a ball of writhing flames. She had managed to hit 2 more, but 5 more were already headed their way, along with 2 as they were rushing towards Oaken. The warrior was ready and couldn't help but whistle. Now that was amazing. How many of them you got? Shaking her head. I prepared a lot, but I've only got 2 left on me. The rest are in the supply wagon. Can you hold out? What choice do we have? Oaken growled out and drew up his axe as the 2 wolves started to charge at him. And as he braced himself, he could hear something else. It drew the attention of even the beasts as they turned their heads in a direction behind the three. It was the sound of the beating hooves rushing towards them. And from the darkness, a small hand axe flew out of nowhere, smashing into the head of the wolf on the left. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. I'm afraid that's all I have time for today, but do not fear, I will be uploading the rest in a couple of nights' time. A huge thank you to our incredible author, KB Michaels, aka Azra Ali. What an incredibly intense start to a unique and fascinating storyline. Thank you ever so much, Michael, for allowing me to narrate this story on the show and putting your trust in me to do the job correctly. Of course, I really hope you enjoyed this rendition and look forward to more updates in the future. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. Well, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. Now, if you're an aspiring writer or would just like to get in touch with me, then please do so on the email, which is as on screen. contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everyone's had a fantastic week at work or school, or perhaps you're studying like my eldest. Whatever it is that you do, I hope you're enjoying it and are giving it your all. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.